So first of all, thank you everybody for having me. It was an interesting invitation given that I'm representing a pediatric rare disease. But as I was sitting in the presentation this morning or this afternoon, realizing there's a lot of commonality between aging and Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which is the disease that I represent. And I'll talk about that a little bit. First, just a little bit of background on me. I preface it always by saying I'm not a scientist, so if you're going to ask questions, be cognizant of that at the end, that you may not get a really scientific answer. But I've learned a lot about one single disease. I never expected, like Mike, to be in the nonprofit world. I was very happy in the technology business and technology publishing, and thought I had this wonderful life, new husband, new baby, everything was great. And then when my son was almost 6 years old, he was diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and I had never heard of that disease. And it basically changed our life and rocked our world. And I think when you talk about what gets you up in the morning and motivates you, and the ups and downs of living hand to foot in the nonprofit world, as Mike said, there are days when you want to give up, but when you look at your child, you know that you can't give up, and it's absolutely what keeps you going. So, with that, am I supposed to know how to advance this? Pardon?
Hit space.
Oh, got it. This is not my son. This is Gavin, and I just put him up here as a representative of a boy with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And I'm going to come back to him and talk a little bit more about him in the future. But he's just as sweet as he looks here, and he's 10 years old now. So Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and I know you want to get on to more of the business model, and I think that's what this conversation is about, and funding opportunities. But just a little bit of background. Duchenne muscular dystrophy is caused by a missing protein called the dystrophin protein. And when you have this missing protein, basically your muscle cells die and they don't regenerate. And so there's a whole cascade of events. You think of your skeletal muscles, but there's so many other parts that are involved in this disease. Cardiac is, your heart is a muscle, diaphragm muscles for breathing and such. And so it basically is a whole systemic degeneration. And what I found really interesting in listening to Dr. Cohn and talking about the mitochondria, and that is something that's becoming really apparent in Duchenne also, in muscular diseases, that the mitochondria is very involved in this. So many of the hallmarks of this disease are hallmarks of aging also. Inflammation, cardiac fibrosis. Usually the boys do succumb to cardiac failure, and that's the leading cause of death in Duchenne. Also, steroid-induced obesity. A lot of these boys are on metformin also, and it's something that, figure if you've got really weak muscles and you're 30 pounds heavier, it's going to make you lose ambulation much quicker. Muscle atrophy, if a boy breaks a leg and he can't put pressure on it, that's usually when they stop walking forever. Not to mention the osteoporosis, because it's our muscle weight-bearing exercise that really gives us strong bones. And so a lot of these boys are very susceptible to fractures, and with that come, fat embolisms and death, and there's just a whole cascade of events. And basically, the prognosis for these boys is usually diagnosed between about 3 and 5 years old. They usually lose ambulation, and they're confined to a wheelchair anywhere between, 8 to 13 years old. And by the time they're teenagers, they usually lose total body function and usually succumb to cardiac failure somewhere, in the early 20s. So it's not a good disease. So it is 100% fatal. We unfortunately don't have any grateful patients because we have not yet found a cure for this disease. We're getting close. And the way that we have worked as an organization, we're a little bit different than most advocacy groups. We do not put a call out for proposals and, rank them and decide which ones we want. We basically, with my scientific team, decide, what does this disease need? And we kind of try and take the 30,000-foot view and look down on it and say, what are the hallmarks of this disease? What are the different parts of the body that we need to deal with? And so, we try and replace the protein. We try and, work all around the disease to come up with a cocktail of therapies, at the same time trying to keep the kids as healthy as possible while we're doing that. And this is really, I think, the subject that I'm here to talk to you about. Again, I didn't know anything about the nonprofit business, and I came from a business background. So the first time that a company came to me and said, we're working on this drug for Duchenne, and we think that, it might be really transformational, would you help fund us? I mean, we talked about it. I had our scientific team vet it, and we felt that it was a good scientific decision. And then the next question was, how much equity do we get in this company? Because I didn't know any better. And I found out afterwards that, you're not supposed to do that. But in fact, it's interesting because we had this first investment and it turned out long-term to be a good investment. But then I got smart. I got to know the ways of the nonprofit business, and everybody, frowned on that. And so a couple of these next investment or the next projects that we funded, I didn't do that because we were collaborating with other organizations, and they were like, oh, no, you can't do that. And so, I'm kicking myself because I look at the stock price of those companies, and they would have been good investments. It was good science, and we would have been able to fund a lot of research had we stuck to that particular business model. So it took me just one or two of those times, and I realized that there is not enough money out there in a rare disease community, and it sounds like in the aging community, I guess we're all part of that, even so, there's not enough money focused on these particular indications. And so if we are going to be funding biotech companies or even scientists who stand to make a lot of money off of these projects, it only makes sense for some of that to come back into our disease groups. We work too hard to raise that money, and it only makes sense. And so we have been very successful with the venture philanthropy model. We have very little NIH funding. I think NIH funds $32 million a year for Duchenne. And the families are stretched. They're trying to take care of disabled kids, and they're not that active in the fundraising process. And so it really just became necessary to try and find alternate sources of revenue. And so just to go back and kind of like a case study, I guess, of how we've evolved. We made an initial investment in a little tiny company in the Netherlands called Prosenza back in 2004, and they had a technology called exon skipping, and it basically tricks the gene into producing the protein, or supposed to produce the protein that can alleviate this disease. And so they've had lots of ups and downs. We were really excited in 2009 that GlaxoSmithKline came in and made a huge commitment into the company to take their lead drug through a phase 3 clinical trial. And we all were jumping up and down thinking, okay, Big Pharma is really smart. They know what they're doing, and they're going to save the day. And what we realized is Big Pharma ran a trial like a Big Pharma does, and we basically ended up with trial results that were inconclusive and that they didn't pass. And so the phase 3 study failed. And at the same time, we're talking to these parents that their kids are doing really well on the drug, and yet the phase 3 failed. And so they walked away from it. And fortunately, BioMarin, not too far from here, they bought the company and then Prosenza had an IPO, and we were able to participate in that. And then BioMarin bought the company in 2015, and we were cashed out of that. And so from a scientific standpoint, I still believe it was the right thing to do. Some of these kids, like Gavin, and I'll come back to him, are thriving on this drug. So we obviously have the situation that we find in science and with the FDA that we're like, we're not on the same page. And so that's a whole nother issue that we have to worry about. But just as a case study here, so we invested $2 million into Prosenza, which is bought by BioMarin. And when we were cashed out of that, we've been able to fund 5 different projects that are already completely funded, and we're working on 2 other ones now. So I think Myotherix was the first one, which is an anti-inflammatory drug, which we were the seed investor there. Resurrex is a company that we funded out of USC. They have a molecule that they discovered there, and we're providing the seed funding for them that looks like it could be anti-fibrotic. We did fund 1 academic scientist. We don't do that often just because of the pace at which they work. I'm not very patient. And, and then last year we funded Capricorn Therapeutics, which is adult stem cells that are delivered directly into the heart. They're actually, age-related indication also. They're actually in trials for adult cardiac failure trials, and then also Duchenne has been added on because of the severe need we have for cardiac treatments. And then just earlier this year, we invested in Bamboo, which is a gene therapy company, which was just 2 weeks ago bought by Pfizer. So out of this this initial investment, we've had 2 successful exits, and we are in the process of hopefully forming 2 brand new companies that one of them looks like a for sure, and one of them is looking really, really good, and we'll probably within the next month or 2 be able to announce these 2 companies. And this all came from one investment that was initiated by venture philanthropy, by donors. And so we're really proud that we can go to our initial donors. There are like 3 initial donors that funded the initial investment here. And I mean, they've just been able to see the science move forward, and for us to reinvest and redeploy these funds. So we're all about innovation. When a new idea comes up, when there's something that is needed, we have a committee of me, basically, and I have a very, very, very competent scientific team. But I guess, and I'm not trying to be cocky about that, but just to say that, sometimes it's just obvious what needs to get done, and we just do it. And, when we needed physical therapy to be spread around the country, we hired physical therapists, and we went around the country and trained them. I mean, that was a decision that was made within a matter of hours, really, seeing the need and being able to address it. Regulatory challenges, we're funding an initiative called CTAP, which is basically trying to take the variability within patient population and apply statistical analysis to it so that we're able to design clinical trials better to get better results so that the FDA can actually see what the patients are seeing. So we just really try and be as innovative as possible. So this is my son, Håkan, and he's my motivation. He's what gets me up, and trust me, there are days that the whole world, this all seems like it's way, way, way too much. But, when he's our only child, and when you see him every day, you can't not do this. And I admire all of the scientists, all the people that are involved in nonprofits who aren't doing this because they're personally affected by this. And every day I say thank you to all the people that do this, because you're doing it because of true caring. I would like to say that I got into this just because I had this huge heart, but it really took me personally to be so personally, slapped up the side of the head with this tragedy that it just brought out this passion in me. Fortunately, Håkan's doing better than most boys his age with Duchenne. We're on Thursday moving him back up to USC for his sophomore year, and he's the deputy news editor of the Daily Trojan there. And so we're very, very proud of him, and he's starting to become a spokesperson for CureDuchenne also. So going back to Gavin, this little boy, I just love him. He's so cute it hurts. And he was in the original drisapersen trial, which BioMarin was running. And unfortunately, the FDA sent them a complete response letter in last year. And it was devastating to the community. Gavin, and there's a quote here from Dr. Craig McDonald from UC Davis, who said that he's never seen a boy with Duchenne at this age have the functionality of Gavin. These drugs are working. We've got to find a way to get the FDA to see that too. And we're working on some innovative ways to be able to provide access to these patients also. This is a boy, Will, who just lost his ability to walk last year. And there's 300,000 boys in the world that have Duchenne. And so we're on a mission like all of you, and we're just working as hard as we can. So that's basically it. CureDuchenne, we have 2 different divisions now. CureDuchenne Cares, which is our parent outreach and education and physical therapy, and then CureDuchenne Ventures, which is our arm that invests in these different companies. So that's it.